Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today, I'm joined by Amit Avasthi, who's the head of HR emerging markets at Larsen Toubro Infotech. Amit, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Chris, thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here. I've been following your podcast, and I must say that this one podcast that I've become a fan of, doing great, and look forward to talking to you today afternoon.
Well, amazing. I really appreciate you replying back to me. So it's just, I can say it's, having a fan on the show is also an amazing moment for me too. And I really appreciate your support as well that you've shown the show. And I'm really happy now I get to have you on the show. So
My pleasure.
That worked out really well for us. So before we jump in, Amit, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Okay, so I've had a very interesting career journey per se. I belong to India, and I've been working across the globe from a perspective of managing employees across the globe. But the career journey started in a company called Ramco, where I initially started in the HR team, but soon that translated to a team where I got into the HR product side, and from there I actually went across the HR technology spectrum. So the learnings that I got were both from a business side. So I actually did business roles in delivery, in sales, in P&L management. I also did a lot of HR work with clients, which actually meant I did a lot of interactions with clients on their change journeys. From there, I said that there seems to be a gap between what clients expect out of a technology system and the kind of processes they have. And that's what took me to the next phase of my journey, which was where I got into consulting. And I worked with Aon Hewitt and Ernst & Young as two organizations where I did a lot of work around both strategic HR consulting, transformational projects, change assignments, as well as delivering standard stuff around engagement and culture. That's what got me more and more deeper into HR. And while working with one of the clients, I got a role in that organization. It's been a great journey. As a person, I'm very passionate about the way technology is transforming the world around us, not just HR, but the world around us. And I think there are a lot of implications in the way things are happening. And that's what kind of excites me about being in HR, because HR is the culmination of everything from the experience that we are trying to build for our employees to how business should transform to adopt to some of these changes. While we talk on this, I just wanted to add that a lot of views that I'll share here would be my own personal views, and it cannot be attributed to any of my previous employees. So that's something that I would want to.
That's understandable. Don't worry.
Yes,
It's completely
correct,
fine.
correct.
And thank you for sharing your journey. I love asking that question because there's never the same answer. And there's always, everyone comes from a different perspective. And it's interesting for you because you started as a practitioner, then you moved into the client side, and now you're back again as a practitioner. So I suppose there's a few different things I want to touch upon there. What were the things that you learned in a practitioner role that then helped you as a consultant? And then the same question after that, what did you learn as a consultant that you've now transferred into being a practitioner? I'll be interested to know what you've taken away from both sides.
Oh, that's a lovely question. So if I look at the practitioner role, right, and I spent very little time to begin with there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that really happened there was in terms of understanding client requirements. I was fresh, raw from college, all ready to jump into the deep end of the sea. But
and then you realize, oh my God, maybe I don't want to be in the deep end anymore.
So the assignment that I got into really gave me a great deal of insights into what is possible, but what should be workable, right? And I think that stays with me today. And increasingly, as we see today's business world evolving, Chris, I believe we are moving to what I call as bite-sized HR, right? So I believe that HR is no more about long interventions with spread over journeys. It's about doing some bite-sized changes, making it more agile, making it aligned to the
Agile,
business.
like project based, so like agile,
Correct,
working in projects, and
correct,
so that
correct.
way you can deliver quickly, make decisions
Quickly
faster,
and
innovate quickly.
move on to the next steps,
Yeah.
then come back and course correct and
Yep.
make some changes again. Keep aligning it to the business because business itself is so
Yes,
dynamic, right?
it
So
needs to evolve as because things change. You can't have a year-long project anymore. It doesn't exist because
true,
things change so
true.
quickly that you need to be able to adapt and work on new problems perhaps that may exist.
And if I look at my journey from consultant to practitioner, I think one of the biggest thing that uh, consulting assignments teach you is how to manage three critical things, which is projects or programs, managing change, and managing relationships. And I think
Yeah.
if I look at HR, that's these are the
Yep.
three key areas that I would attribute to any HR function, right? And any HR role. So in consulting, I got into projects which were very, very demanding, very, very challenging. But it did teach me how to really work with stakeholders, how to manage things within tight timelines, how to really work across a group of people.
What are some of the practical things that you did then to make sure, or some of the processes or that you developed personally to make sure that you achieved those different areas?
So okay, so I think coming from a business side, I could see that a lot of the processes that HCL had, right? So they were more attuned to an organization of a smaller size. So and at that point of time, uh, I went into the career journey and kind of redefined the way the careers are looked at. And I think CEB also recognized this as a best practice because what we did was uh, created a completely crowdsourced based model of careers. So essentially careers does not become a journey from point A to point B. It becomes more like a Google Maps where you can traverse in any direction.
You should
And
be able
yet,
to, especially in a large
yes,
organization. Yeah.
yes. And I think the interesting part of that was people also realized that HCL as an organization offers flexibility, which makes it very easy for employees to actually move from a role which they have not done before into a role which they want to do, and that's the crux of learning, right? So as an
Yeah.
organization, that flexibility was great.
And that's how you
uh,
retain your talent.
that's true.
And they don't
that's
leave because you give them
that's
opportunities to. That's one of the reasons that I left my previous company, is that I was stuck in the same role and they wouldn't give me the option to move, and I'd been doing the same job for 10 years.
and come
And I
to
was
think,
just bored. I was just like, mentally, I wasn't challenged. I wasn't developing. I wasn't progressing. I was doing a good job. I had a great team, but I was mentally wasn't engaged in the work because I wanted to do more and learn and expand my own knowledge and experience.
no,
So,
and while it's a theoretical concept, right, but I believe in it so strongly that there are only three things which are required for employees. One is autonomy, purpose, and mastery. So if we provide these three things to employees, I think we have achieved everything. And come to think of it, right? So how many times we have people joining roles within the organizations and roles not being crafted for people,
yeah.
right? So if we were to just turn the tables on looking at what skills people bring and looking at certain specific roles which can be crafted for people, I think we will be able to deploy and engage our talent much better.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is HR transformation, right? Because obviously
Mhm.
you've definitely led many transformations in your career, and aligning HR as a strategic business partner. Now, this is something we've been speaking about for many years, but I think not many
Mhm.
organizations have effectively put it in action as well. And I feel like we have to move this way in order to deliver on this new world of work and the future of work that we're living in. Could you share your thoughts and experience around this?
I think these are two parts of the same coin, right? So when a person works as a strategic HR business partner, the intent on this strategy is very, very important for that discussion with the business leader in a way that you are able to pick up from the strategy and drive what is critical for the business. And I think I'm talking about everything from key pivotal roles to engaging with talent and ensuring that business has the right quantity and quality of talent to deliver on the business agenda. When we talk about transformation, and any kind of transformation, it can be a business-led transformation or a HR process transformation. I think one of the most important aspects, which also goes to where the strategic HR business partnering should start, is getting business buy-in. I think a lot of times in my experience, I've seen that people act in a haste to provide a change, but the buy-in is not there. And when that happens, it essentially helps nobody, because there's a change which happens, and afterward that change does not get recognized, or it gets rolled back. A lot of transformation projects fail because of the buy-in related issues. And when I say buy-in, I think I would go to Amazon philosophy, right? So we disagree and we commit. I love that word that came from Jeff Bezos, for the simple reason that not every time people will be in agreement, but it's very important to commit to something once there is a decision taken and a way forward has been attained. Another important part of the change journey is how you actually make future road visible to people, right? So change is a journey from step A to step B. Can I actually make people see what they will feel once the change is done? That's another area which I feel is very, very critical, because a lot of leaders and a lot of people in my interactions, they talk about change, but the complete visibility of what that change would bring about is not visible, right?
And
So
that's why people don't buy in, because you want us to do all this work, but we don't know what we're working towards.
Correct.
Or what this new world will look like, and what is my role in this new world? What is it going to mean for me? How am I going to benefit?
Absolutely. And as a part of my own experimentation with this, I actually did a gamification of the entire process transformation exercise that I did in one of my assignments. What we did was we moved away from explaining people in PPTs or explaining people in community gatherings or team town halls about this change. What we did was we actually played out the change in form of a game. And that game had steps related to performance, learning, role. People were able to appreciate what they are going through and how that will impact them. I think that visualization of change is very, very important. The third piece, which is very important, is once a journey starts, right? So I think a lot of organizations start with a buy-in from the top, and the buy-in reaches somewhere in the middle of the organization, but it doesn't seeps into the employees. So employees are kind of thrust with the change.
They get it at the end.
Yeah,
exactly.
So they're just said, this is happening and you have to do it. If an employee doesn't see what's in it for me, why would they want to do it?
Yeah,
and that's very important. I think if a lot of times we forget what's in it for me is very, very important. Now going back to strategic HR business partnering and linking the two, right? So I think for every HR intervention, if we are able to define a bite-sized approach, we are able to define the change agenda, we are able to define what changes for employees, managers, leaders, and we are able to get buy-in at different levels and bring the what's in it for me clear. I think the entire HR business partnering would be a much easier thing. I was on the board of the JV, and we used to work very closely with the board members. One of the things that I kind of experienced there was that HR always has to find how to justify its seat on the table. This is another paradox that HR has been struggling with
for a long
So
time.
how can you add value? I don't think we add value, we create value. Value creation starts at two different levels. One is at a strategic level, where we align not just to the business leaders and to the business goals, we actually align business in the right way so that talent for that needs can be supported, right? So I'll take an example, right? So one of the leading areas, I'm just taking an example outside the context of my work, but let's say there's a leader who's managing cloud or managing VR. Now, cloud and VR are in technologies, but as an organization, what's your pie in cloud? What's your market potential in cloud? what's your market potential and how do you want to go about attacking that market? If that priority is not there, and if it's not a priority area, why do you even want to invest in it, right? So I think those discussions are very important, and HR still shies away from that discussion. I think HR comes in where they start talking, okay, let's have a talent discussion now that you have decided
Now
how
you've
we
already
move forward.
decided on that. Then yeah, we should be involved in the initial
Initial
phase.
discussions and getting a view of how things can transform right from the word go for the business.
You've covered so much there, Amit. So many different areas. So going back to the initial one, which was the first one you mentioned, which was about sort of the buy-in. We hear this all the time, right? And it's a constant thing that comes up and over again. Based on your experience, again, interestingly, both from the vendor side and a practitioner side, what is the best way, or what advice would you give in terms of how to get buy-in and how to go about that?
I mean, I wouldn't go to theoretical model, but what works very well in my mind is first figuring out who really are supporters of your change, who are the fence sitters, who would be people who would kind of block your change. Then figuring out how do you get each of these stakeholders aligned. Now, it's important to have some people who would block that change also, because if you don't have that, then the process
It's probably not. Yeah, it's probably not innovative if no
correct.
one's
Correct.
yeah.
So it's important that people have objections, people have disagreement. Very, very important to have that group. I think it's about the fence sitters where the focus should be, because they have some concerns, and those concerns are mostly ignored. Now, how do you figure out who is a fence sitter, who's supporter?
That's
That's
what I was going
always
to
a
ask.
tough one, right?
Yeah, yeah. How do you know that? Because they're not really vocal
Correct.
about it, right?
Correct. And even supporters, right? I've seen supporters in front of a particular group turn completely into a fence sitter in a different group. So it's all about really taking them along the change journey together. First, getting them to understand why this journey is important. So it goes back to the basic of communication, right? And often most of the change is perceived as driven from the top. And when that happens, people do accept the change, but they don't buy into the change.
There's a big difference.
Yeah. So I'll give you a classic a joke on this, right? So there were a group of 5 frogs, and one of them decided to jump. So how many frogs were there?
4.
No, 5, because one of them decided to jump. He did not jump.
Okay.
And I think that tells the whole impact of where a person is, and just making a decision does not really mean anything in context.
Yeah.
Right. So when I talk about taking them along in the journey, it's about getting them aligned to the objectives, getting them aligned to the way the journey would operate, making them a stakeholder in the process, which is very, very important. Because a lot of times, if a person is not a stakeholder in the process, they would probably be there, but not be there with their heart and soul.
Yeah, and that goes back to making sure it aligns with what does it mean for them, and understanding their personal motivators,
Absolutely.
and how to do that, because that happens all the time. We see that probably one of the biggest mistakes that we roll out. People they're going to do it, or they're going to agree to do it, but they're not going to be working hard to do it. They're not going to go above and beyond to deliver and push through those difficult times if there's not a sense of purpose. Makes a lot of sense. What about the second part then you mentioned in terms of the transformation? How do we go about doing that?
First, very important aspect of any transformation journey is to understand what really is going to change, because when we look at any transformation journey, there's a step A to step B. It could be a merger or an acquisition. It could be a business transformation where you want to move from a particular strategy to a new strategy. It could be a pure play HR transformation where you want to really transform the culture of the organization, or transform the processes, or transform how the way work is delivered, right? So it's very, very important to, again, assess and get the objective clear. Look at the stakeholders in the process, because that's where the second most important piece is. In a transformation journey, anything that is done in isolation by a function will never succeed. I think it is about the entire organization. Even though it may be an HR transformation, it is about the entire organization.
Mm-hmm.
And the getting that core group together is very, very crucial. There are groups who are macro thinkers, and there are people who are executors.
Yeah,
Uh,
you need to
getting
have the
them,
executors as well.
yeah, executors as well as macro thinkers need to be aligned, and they need to be brought in together into the whole process. Then anything that is transformation cannot be really a pilot-based approach. So it has to be big bang. And accordingly, you need to have teams which can playing to the strengths of the team, playing to the strengths of the individual. So mapping key resources there is very, very important. So you need a strong project team leader who can drive the transformation journey. The next important step, which I think is communication, because if there's no communication happening, I think that will again kill the whole transformation process as I see it, right? And that's very, very critical. And a lot of times over communication and under communication both hamper. So how do you get in the right sort of messages with the right amount of rigor is very, very important.
Amit, could you share some examples of that? Because I think so in your previous companies where you've done this, some practical examples of what you've actually done.
So one of the examples that I gave you was the gamification example that I talked
That's a
about.
great one. Yes. So let's jump into that. So is that something you
So,
built internally? Or
yes, built internally, and we had to deliver on a key process transformation in a defined timeline. By the time we got everything moving and we got the buy-in and we got the changes done, so if I were to look at the month, so we had it April, and our target was to deliver the program by July. And I'm talking about a program which was spread across 30 odd countries. And
wow.
so it was actually at that point of time, there were many mobile games which had come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that we could probably replicate something similar to show employees, and we could create a mobile game. And that's when I got deeper into gamification, and I thought that a game board might be a better version than using a mobile game or any other form of game, because in that you control the communication and at the same time communicate the message as well. Gamification as a tool has a lot of potential benefits, perhaps very, very under leveraged. We actually put a real game board. So it was a paper board,
Mm-hmm.
which was used. And when we kind of got that board in, and we put it in a big room around the cafeteria, so employees used to come and they could see that there's this new board, and they'll become curious about it, and they'll come to us, and we'll give them some cards. Cool way to engage people, right? So
Yeah, something different. It's not something. It's not
if
an
you
email they get sent.
True. If you get people to talk about such things, and if you tell them this is the change and this is what is going to happen, I think they may agree, but they may not buy in. When you are communicating changes, when you as in anybody is communicating changes, it's very important to keep the entire messaging consistent. A lot of times the message becomes person dependent, and
Yeah.
here we had a complete script and a process defined. So it made the whole change journey very, very consistent across different areas, different boundaries.
Different countries, different
Absolutely.
different continents.
Absolutely.
I know a big passion of yours is obviously technology, as you've just mentioned, and as a HR leaders now, the competencies and the skills that they require in this new world of work has changed dramatically. What sort of skills and competencies do you think will be more important for HR leaders moving forward?
So I must say that this is the most exciting time to be in HR profession. I think technology is going to change really fast, and as HR professionals, if we are not in tune with these technological changes, we will be left far behind. And it's more about a paradigm shift that we are talking about here. It's not so much about just changing the way we think HR. It's also about changing the way we organize organizations, right? So the need for fluidity within organization setups would become far higher than what it is today. The need for creating multiple hybrid groups The need to reskill workers from where they are today to managing roles which probably wouldn't get redundant at that time would become far higher. So where do HR professionals start, right? So it'll be a fallacy to assume that everybody can learn everything. So there are behavioral sciences, anthropologists, there are analytic geeks, and then there are traditional HR professionals. So any organization would need to have a mix of these three. Of course, there can be other variants as well. So consultants, change agents, and so many others. But from a technology perspective, I think it's very important to have a mix of all these, because a lot of work that we would do going forward would be in terms of understanding how behaviors are getting changed with all these technological changes. Imagine if Alexa becomes like your real-time HR support system. You call into an Alexa and Alexa is offering you the HR support. How would people deal with that, right? And
Yeah.
what kind of role would HR have in that?
The other areas before we wrap up that you're most excited about that sort of are front of mind for you at the moment?
If I look at the entire plane of where we are today and what we want to deliver uh, as a function, I think that there's literally so much to do. But one of the key areas which really comes to my mind and which is going to get increasingly important in the times of business change is coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And as a executive coach myself, what I've found out is a lot of coaching interventions do not have the right impact because we are focused on attaining a goal or attaining an outcome. If we focus on the method, because I think coaching is more about the method than the outcome, and we focus on driving that method to an execution. And when I talk about that, let me give you an example, right? So I had this particular person that I was working with as a coach. In my discussions with that person, I kind of started relating very well to the business journey that that person was going. And somewhere I stepped out of my coach uh, shoes and I started advising that person. And that literally backfired because I should have just stayed as a coach and guided that journey.
Objectively.
And yes, and that's where I think given the changes that we are observing, it's about shaping the entire organization journey. And coaching has a 10x ROI if I really look at some of the research there, right? So coaching the right way can actually improve the business performance by 10x. Now, how do you get there? The answer to it is again to ensure that the organization is invested in coaching. The organization feels that coaching with a group of coaches is not something which is kind of must do, but it is something that will do, and they'll help actually transforming their leaders. Somewhere this whole coaching philosophy also needs to look at starting early, which we typically don't do. We
That's what I was
typically
going to say, because normally coaches, they normally bring them in when there's a problem,
yeah, exactly.
as opposed to bringing in coaches as continuous improvement
Correct.
and continuous learning and development. If you look at some of the most successful sports athletes in the world, they have coaches,
Absolutely.
and they've always had a coach, and they're the
Absolutely.
best, and they are the best at what they do. If you talk about someone like Roger Federer or some of the basketball players who are out there, they have a coach. Even though they're the best in their field at what they do, they still have a coach, because
Absolutely.
continue to get better and develop. There's never an end goal. There's never a goal, an end date to their development. It's a continuous. And I feel like we should do the same in business. We've spoken a lot about transformation, right, over the last half an hour. And so looking back, and then for everyone listening, because all of the leaders, as part of being a HR leader now, you're in constant change and transformation. If you're not comfortable in that change, then you shouldn't be in HR, because that's just really part of the role right now, right? For any HR leader. What advice would you give to them, for anyone who's going to be going through these based on your experience and your insights? What advice would you give to any of the leaders that are listening that are currently going through that change right now, or that will be in the future?
It's important to understand whether it's change done for the sake of change, or is it change which is meaningful, right? A lot of times organizations go through the change because they want to change something. The next step is understanding what would really make this change successful, or what would make this transformation journey successful. Is it uh, getting to a objective outcome which can be quantified? So how do you show the ROI or the outcome to the stakeholders? That's very, very important, because uh, a lot of times organizations are not able to quantify the ROI or the outcome, and leaders are not invested in that change. It's very, very important that we spend a lot of time doing that. Third is getting a bit of socialization around the change. So is the change something that the leader is feeling, or the person in the HR team is feeling, or is it also a genuine business need that really needs to be tackled or supported, right? So I think getting lost in that myth of doing change because something is not working, rather than trying to see what's really working and how do we make it better, is a difference between a transformation and a transaction. So that's very, very important. And a lot of times organizations spend so much of time investing resources and doing all this, at the end realizing that the change journey that they took didn't lead them anywhere. Uh, and even if there's a buy-in internally, I think it's more important to get the key architects of the change aligned, because
Yeah,
it
because the
cannot
people
be
that are at the top aren't the one who's actually executing on it. And I think that's people forget, right? The
correct.
decision may be made at the top, but the people that actually who are going to be on the ground executing and
Correct.
rolling out, they're the ones that need to be the most engaged.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you need to have while you need to have an exec sponsor, it's very, very important that you get the right people and the right teams aligned, because uh, one wrong person in a wrong role in that project can actually hamper the entire program.
Well, before we wrap up, Amit, we're just going to quickly jump into the quick fire round. And
Mhm,
so I'm going to ask you 5 questions,
mhm.
and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
You have a timer. I don't have one. So you
um,
time it.
yeah. What are some of the things that you had to learn to help you adapt? The most important thing you had to learn to adapt into those roles. It's great that you jumped in, but I'm sure there's things that you had to develop as a leader yourself in order to be successful.
Oh, I think one of the most important thing is to have or develop perseverance and restraint both. A lot of times it's not so much about what you feel, it's about what others feel, and you have to give that. So listening a lot
Very
more
important.
than talking is very, very important, I
Yeah,
think.
and it's very hard. That is a skill,
It is,
for
it is.
me, for a lot, because sometimes you want to just say, you just want to immediately say something, but it's so much more powerful just to hold back and ask a question instead,
And I think
and
you have
listen.
also been in a sales role, and I've also been in a sales role. So we both know how perseverant and
Yes.
resilient salespeople become, right?
Yeah, but that's also the
So
temptation to tell everyone how incredible your solution is instead of asking a question and being
exactly.
quiet and ask and listening and understanding
And
the need of the client. So that's the skill that took me quite a long time to master as well.
and that's something that I learned by virtue of being a consultant
I can,
when I
yeah,
wore the
it's
consultant
the
hat.
key to being a consultant is if you can't listen and ask good open questions, then you shouldn't be a consultant. So
True,
yeah, makes sense.
true.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
There's a long story, but I would not go into that story. I would keep it short. So one of the things that I learned very early on in my career is there would be times when you would really need to jump into the pool and shallow end of the pool. If you don't do that, then you have lost your moment. And I think that's something that I've kind of followed with my teams, and I give them the opportunity to really jump and experience things for themselves
In the
rather
deep
than
end
being
or the shallow end?
deep end.
Deep end, all right.
And I keep them under my cover for sure. But what really that helps them do is figure out things that they could do well for themselves.
What about for yourself personally, in terms of your own development? Is there any books you would recommend to our audience to read that you do really helped you out, inspired you?
Oh, yes. One of the books that I've been reading right now is Talent Manifesto. A really great read. Helps you understand both from a business perspective and a consultant perspective, because it's been written by a Korn Ferry author. And I would highly recommend that book. It has become a Amazon bestseller recently. One of the best books that I've read, and I admire that person as well, is a book called Work Rules by Laszlo Bock.
Oh yeah, that's
Uh,
Google, right? Former
yes,
Google.
and
Yeah.
and I think the way he has kind of merged various concepts, and in fact, I did a book review of that on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, I've
So,
heard a lot of good things about that book. It's been recommended
oh
quite a few
yes.
times, but if anyone hasn't listed it, I'll link it in the descriptions. Could you share some, so in terms of internet resources, what are some of the online tools or resources that you use to stay up to date with current events or even stay productive?
So one is your broadcast
Oh,
for
thank
sure.
you.
Uh, I loved listening to it because you have got really good speakers on the show. So it's really been good to get a different perspective every time you hear somebody answering a particular challenge or a particular question. Uh, then I do visit TED a lot, because TED has got really great speakers and some of the best content available. I generally like reading books more, because I believe a lot of the articles, and if I really look at articles, I would go to SHRM, because that's one source that I trust.
Fantastic. And then last question for you.
Sure.
What's the one thing about your business that you're in right now that you're most excited about?
Wow, that's a tough one considering my disclaimer. But I think what really is happening, and I would look at my business as well as the generic environment around us,
Hmm.
is the constant change, and the change brings in a lot of exciting opportunities to work with people at an individual level, at a team level, at an organizational level, help them do something better than what they were doing yesterday. And I think I'm really passionate about that. That's what keeps me moving in HR function, because it's all about understanding how we can make things better for our employees, our stakeholders, from what they were previously.
Amazing. I always get excited when I hear a HR professional say that they're most excited about change, because if that's what excites you and that's what gets you up in the morning, and obviously the impact that that change can have on the lives of your employees and your customers, etc., then you're in the right role. So you're in the right job. So you got that, and that's so. Thank you so much for joining the show. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Before we wrap up, if there's one parting piece of advice you could give to other HR leaders out there that are developing, so young HR leaders that are developing on their journey, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so I think it's very, very important to be in an environment which challenges you. So I think a lot of us become very comfortable in our comfort zone. So let's say I talk about a CNB professional, compensation and benefits, or a rewards professional, right? They would become a rewards professional for life. Why not look at the journey outside rewards profession, right? There is so much to do. Uh, and I'm not picking up rewards because I have
That's a
anything
good
against them,
example, by the way, because
but
I've noticed that too. That's a good example, by the
yes,
way. Yeah.
yes. So I think it's very, very important to shake out of your comfort zone. I've done it so many times in my career that now I don't let myself settle into any comfort zone.
You don't like it
Uh,
anymore. I hate
I
comfort.
don't. I
I
don't.
get bored.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very important that you constantly innovate yourself, because if you're not doing that, you will become redundant as soon as more than your role will become redundant, right?
Well, look, Amit, I have to wrap up. Otherwise, we're going to be here forever. I would love to talk to you all day long, and I think we definitely have to do a part two to this
Yeah,
conversation as
I'll look forward to it, Chris.
well. And for everyone listening, as always, guys, for everyone listening, if you head over to hrleaders.com, you'll find the show notes from this episode on our website. The links to everything that Amit's been talking about and sharing will be linked on the website for you. So make sure you head over to hrleaders.com to check that out. apart from that, Amit, I really appreciate you taking the time out. I know you've definitely shared a lot of great insights and experience of our listeners. So I know they'll be a lot better off for it. So thank you for that. And I wish you all the best, and until we next connect.
Another important part of the change journey is how you actually make future road visible to people, right? So change is a journey from step A to step B. Can I can I actually make people see what they will feel once the change is done? That's another area which I feel is very, very critical, because a lot of leaders and a lot of people in my interactions, they talk about change, but the complete visibility of what that change would bring
Yeah.
about is not visible, right?
And
So
that's why
that's
people don't buy in, because
correct,
you want us to do all this work, but we don't know what we're working towards,
correct.
or what this new world will look like, and what is my role in this new world. What is it going to mean for me? How am I going to benefit? You know,
Absolutely, and as a part of my own experimentation with this, I actually did a gamification of the entire process transformation exercise that I did in one of my assignments. What we did was we moved away from explaining people in PPTs or explaining people in community gatherings or team town halls about this change. What we did was we actually played out the change in form of a game. And that game had steps related to performance, learning, role. People were able to appreciate what they are going through and how that will impact them. We actually put a real game board. So it was a paper board
Mm-hmm.
which was used. And when we kind of got that board in, and we put it in a big room around the cafeteria, so employees used to come and they could see that there's this new board, and they'll become curious about it, and they'll come to us, and we'll give them some cards. Cool way to engage people, right? So
Yeah, something different. It's not
uh,
something. It's not
if
an
you get
email they get sent.
true. If you get people to talk about such things, and if you tell them this is the change and this is what is going to happen, I think they may agree, but they may not buy in. When you are communicating changes, when you as in anybody is communicating changes, it's very important to keep the entire messaging consistent. A lot of times the message becomes person dependent, and
Yeah.
here we had a complete script and a process defined. So it made the whole change journey very, very consistent across different areas, different boundaries.
Different countries, different
Absolutely.
different continents.
Absolutely.
We've
Mhm.
spoken a lot about transformation, right, over the last half an hour.